Today's daf we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah Daf Kaf Hey. Today's daf is sponsored by Malka Luzon in memory of her father, Gilbert Luzon, Nisim Ben Sultana, on his ninth yahrzeit. A man of many accomplishments, he taught us to work hard, to act honestly with integrity, to be charitable, and to explore the world. Despite his great successes, he was a person of incredible humility. His warmth and intelligence were missed daily by all who knew him. The life lessons he taught us, by simply being who he was, are the ones we will pass on to our children, the grandchildren he loves so dearly. We're going to get started now with totally off-topic discussions, although perhaps there's some connection between the topics, maybe at least in the beginning. We ended with singing cows and the different opinions about what song they were singing. And among the way that we're seemingly going to get connected to these, the connection between the next number of sugyot, which is a bit of a strange connection, but of the six opinions that there were, two of them, one was in the name of Rabbi Elazar and one was in the name of Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. And we're going to see a slew of debates that the two of them appear in with other people as well. So that seems to be the connection. We're not going to talk about when Joshua stopped the sun from setting. Okay, although we're going to see he didn't just stop the sun from setting, which is usually what we talk about, but he actually stopped the sun two times in that day. And the question is going to be, for how long did the sun stop? How long was the day in which the sun stopped? How many hours was that day? And we're going to have three different opinions. And we're actually going to have two versions of the three different opinions. So we're going to get to six different opinions altogether. And for that, I did a study guide just to see the numbers to make it easier to follow. Vayidom hashemesh v'yareach hamad ad yikom goy oivav. Okay, so the sun stopped and the moon stood until they finished taking vengeance on the enemy. Halohi ktuva al Sefer Hayashar, and this is written on the Sefer in the Sefer Hayashar. What is the Sefer Hayashar? So we're going to get to this. The first question the Gemara asks is my Sefer Hayashar. Later, we're going to see another verse in the Nevi'im where it talks about the Sefer Hayashar, and there we're actually going to have three opinions. Again, two of them being Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. But right now, we're going to only have one, the one that is going to appear later, disagreeing with them. Amar Bichir Bar my Sefer Hayashar. Amar Bichir Bar Abba. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Zeh Sefer Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov shenikru Yesharim. And we're now going to quote from the parsha we just read yesterday from Balak. Shene'emar tamot nafshi mot yeshari. Okay, so let's start explaining. Let's start from Bilam. Okay, from Parshat Balak. Bilam says, I want to die the death of the straight ones, the Yesharim, which means I want to die like the forefathers died, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which is right. Usually it says by tzaddikim vayigva vayemot, which means they died a peaceful death. That's how he wants to die. Okay, Vatehi achariti kamohu is the end of that pasuk, and my end should be like them. And so that's how they get that this is the book of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which is otherwise known as Sefer Breshit. So according to Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Sefer Hayashar is Sefer Breshit. Now, okay, let's go back. So what they're saying is the fact that the sun stopped in the time of Yoshua was actually mentioned already in Sefer Breshit. Okay, I don't know if you've read through Sefer Breshit. Have you ever noticed it mentioned there? Well, the Gemara is already asking, hey, Miza, where is it alluded to? Because clearly it doesn't say it explicitly. V'zar'o yiyem alo agoyim. When Yaakov blesses Ephraim, he says your children will be Milo Hagoyim. Like, okay, it's unclear exactly what this means, but Malay in the Goyim, like known very well amongst the other nations. Now, Ematai you Yemelo Goyim, B'sha'ah Shamdav lo Chamal Yoshua. Yoshua was from Ephraim. And the most famous thing that affected everybody in the world was when the sun stopped. So he became a Goyim in that, right? It sounds like it means in numbers, and Ephraim actually wasn't so large a number. So what it must be meaning here is that they were known because of Yoshua, because then everyone knew about what had happened. And before we go on, I really can't stop but try not to go too off the daf. But in the introduction to the Ha'emek Davar, which is the Nitziv's commentary on the Torah, his introduction to Sefer Breshit, he has a one-page short introduction, and the first thing he says is Sefer Breshit is called Sefer Hayashar, and then he quotes our Gemara, and then he tries to give an explanation as to why it's called Sefer Hayashar and why our he even says, why weren't they called tzaddikim or chasidim, right? That would be another term that we would think to define the forefathers. So then, and why is the book called this? And he quotes obviously Bilam also. And then he says, it really comes from Torah, from Parshat Ha'azinu, where it says, Hatzur tamim pa'alot tzaddik v'yasharhu. And describing God, they say God is yashar. Yashar means straight. So what does yashar really mean? Well, what he explains is, Deshevach yashar hu ne'emar latzdik din HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'churban bayit sheni. Says the real reason why they use yashar is to justify God's behavior in destroying the second temple. And why was the second temple destroyed? It says, the people were tzaddikim and chasidim and amlei Torah. They were engrossed in Talmud Torah. They were a great generation. So what was the problem? Well, it says they were not yesharim b'halichot olamim. Meaning, says the sinat chinam that they had, that they suspected each other, and they had, right, anyone they didn't like, they called it stuki or an apikorus, right? And there was a lot of animosity between people, and anyone who didn't believe exactly the way they believed, there were name throwing and bad, bad blood between people. And it says, and they ended up coming to Shvichut Damim and all the bad things in the world until the temple was destroyed. Right? So this is an interesting way where he's saying basically the people of that generation might have been Talmidei Chachamim, they might have been Tzaddikim and Chasidim, but in the way they treated people who didn't agree with their belief system, right? They didn't treat them well. And that, he says, stands in complete opposition to the forefathers. And the reason why I wanted to bring this, first of all, it's super interesting. And second of all, very relevant if we talk about our split in the nation right now in Israel and in general. He also, since we're in the middle of Masechet Avodas Zarah, we're struggling with all these sections, particularly later today. We see, you're walking with a Gentile on the street, you should be concerned, right? This idol worshiper is going to maybe kill you. We're going to talk about that. Like, why are they, why are we suspecting they're going to kill us? But he says here that that what was unique about the forefathers, that they were, besides that they were tzaddikim, chasidim, v'ohavei Hashem, okay, and they love God, but in addition, they were yesharim, which means what? She'nagu imumot haolam afilu avdei elim mechoarim. They went around in the world dealing with even idol worshippers, right? Abraham was surrounded, everybody around him was an idol worshiper. And even the worst of the worst he dealt with. And not only did he deal with them, but hayu imam ba'ahava. They loved them. And chashu letovatam. They wanted their good for them. Okay, like for example, he brings Abraham and Stone, right? They wanted to destroy Stone, and Abraham goes and prays for them and tries to save them, even though it was clear they were evil people and doing terrible things, right? Even though he hated him, they say. And as it says when he talks to Melech Stone, but he wanted them to survive. Okay, and he wanted what was good for them. So in any case, it goes on, but that's the idea of what Yesharim is, to even love people that you disagree with, and even love people that might be objectively evil people, but to deal with the world in a way of seeing us all as equals. So it's a nice idea, and it's right here in Masechet Avodah Zarah on the same page where, be careful, they might kill you, or be careful, they might rape you. So it's interesting, the balance here. Okay, so now we're going to get back to the sun stopping. So now it says, B'sha'a shamda lo chama Yoshua, it says, Vaya'amod Hashemesh b'chatzi hashamayim. So the sun stopped in the middle of the sky. And what does it mean in the middle of the sky? Well, that's the middle of the day. Then it says, V'lo atz lavo ki yom tamim. And it wasn't fast to come, to come of the sun. When they say that Bahashemesh, it always means to set. It wasn't quick to set, kiyom tamim, like a complete day. Complete day is usually 24 hours. So the question is how to define what was like a complete day. What's that section referring to? So Amar Rabbi Vekama. So how long did the sun stop for, and how long was that day? Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The entire day was 24 shai, 24 hours. Now what we mean is the daytime hours. Normally the daytime hours are 12 hours, right? In a halachic day, the days always have 12 hours. They might be 60-minute hours. They might be 52-minute hours. They might be 70 hours, right? 70-minute hours, depending on what time of year we're in. But they're always calling them 12 hours. So now we're going to say that day, instead of having 12 hours of daylight hours, there were 24 hours of daylight. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now so you can see the charts of the different opinions here. So basically, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Azal sheet, it went 6, meaning from sunrise, it went 6 hours. Kam sheet, it stopped for 6. Azal sheet, it went another 6, but Kam sheet and stopped for 6 before it set. Kula milta ki yom tamim. So that's how they understand this. Lo atzlavo ki yom tamim. It didn't speedily, set like a complete day, meaning the whole 12 hours of day was actually like a complete day, which was 24 hours. Rabbi Elazar Amar Shloshim B'Shit. He says, no, altogether the day was 36. So we're going to have to understand how he understands this Kiyom Tamim. Azal Shit v'kam Tresar. Azal Shit v'kam Tresar. It went 6, stopped for 12. Went 6, stopped for 12. Amidato Kiyom Tamim. They say, when it says it was like a Yom Tamim, Vayamod Hashemesh b'chatzi Hashamayim, v'lo atzlavo Kiyom Tamim, means is it didn't set like a complete day, meaning the amount of extra time in the day was a complete day. 12 hours in the middle of the day, 12 hours at the end of the day, 24 extra hours in that day. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, I want you to pay attention. I mentioned before, Rabbi Elazar was the middle opinion, and now we get to Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. He says, Arba'im Shmona. It was 48 hours. This 12-hour period was 48 hours. There were 36 extra hours. So how do we get to 36? Azal sheet become Tresar. So in the beginning, he says, like Rabbi Elazar, went 6, moved 6, right, from sunrise to the middle of the day, then stopped for 12. Azal sheet become Esrim Ba'arba. Then it went 6 and stopped for 24. Shenemal, Velo Atz Lavo Kiyom Tamim. Now notice it says it didn't hurry to set like a complete day. How do we understand that? That before sunset, it was a complete day that it stopped, this 24 number. And then how do we know that it actually stopped for less time in the middle of the day? From there it says, it only says Yom Tamim at the end, right? First it said it stopped in the middle of the heavens, in the middle of the sky. Then it said, and it didn't speed to set like a complete day. So the complete day was only mentioned at the end of that verse. So that means there was a difference in how long it stopped in the middle of the day and how long it stopped at the end of the day. He's the first one who mentions this here. Everyone else thought it was the same. He points out, no, because the Yom Tamim comes specifically at the end. That must be, it stopped for 24 hours at the end of the day, but in the middle of the day, it stopped for 12. And that's how he gets all together to 48, 6 plus 12 plus 6 plus 24, 48 hours. That's version 1 of the Machlok. Now we're going to go to version 2 of the Machlok. Okay, the same 3 people, but that they have different opinions. Their numbers are the same, but the total number is the same, but what they were talking about was different. So let's see. Some people say that their machloket was the additional hours. In other words, we still have 24, 36, 48, but they're not talking about what the daylight hours were on that day. They're talking about how long the sun stopped on that day. Did it stop for 24 hours? Did it stop for 36? Did it stop for 48? Now, you can already see from the chart that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's position here is the same as Rabbi Elazar's position in the previous one. And Rabbi Elazar in this one is the same as Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani in the previous. And there's no opinion like Rabbi Shua ben Levi. There was 6, in this one, that the whole day was Yom Tamim, right? The whole thing was 24 hours altogether. And there's going to be a new opinion of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani here, which is going to be different that we didn't see in the previous. So now let's go and explain each of these opinions. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar Esrim Ba'arba, Azal sheet kam Tresar, Azal sheet kam Tresar, went 6, stopped 12, went 6, stopped 12. That's how you get to 24 complete hours where it stopped. 12 and 12 is 24. Amidato ki Yom Tamim, and that's exactly what we have Rabbi Elazar say, which is when it described it didn't speedily set like a complete day, that was referring to both phrases. It stopped, right? It says originally Vayamod Hashemesh b'chatzi Hashamayim v'lo atz lavo, and it right, so it stood in the middle of the heavens and the sky and didn't speedily set. That whole thing kiyom tamim, like a complete day. Rabbi Elazar, which again means the time it stood. Rabbi Elazar amar 36, azal sheet kam tresar, azal sheet kam 24. Right, so went 6, stopped 12, went 6, stopped 24. Below, and that's obviously the other opinion, which is lo atzlavo ki yom tamim. Specifically, the sunset says it was a complete day. So at sunset, it was a complete day. Earlier, it must have been less. So if that was 24, that must have been 12. But here comes our new opinion. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar ba'im shmone. Azal sheet become 24, azal sheet become 24. Each time it stopped for 24 hours. Makisha midato libiato, right? Now this is taking a twist on Rabbi Shua ben Levi's opinion here. It stopped, right? Everything was kiyom tamim. Now we thought that meant the time it stopped in both was a kiyom tamim. Now we're going to say each stop of the sun was a complete day. So makisha midato libiato. Now it's kind of a combo of the previous two. Lo atzlavo kiyom tamim means at the end of the day it didn't set and waited for a complete day. But now it's going to say, since just before that it mentioned it stopped in the middle of the day, we're going to say the middle of the day is like the end of the day. Ma biato, just like at the end of the day, it was kiyom tamim. Afa midato, when it stood in the middle of the day, it was also kiyom tamim. And that's how we get each time it was 24 hours. Altogether, we're going to have 48 hours. Oh, right, 48 hours of break. Okay. But the whole day was even more, it was another 12 hours more, 60 hours. Okay, these are our 6 different opinions. Again, 3 opinions, but each one kind of right in a different version. Were they arguing over the additional hours, or were they arguing over the complete day? Okay. Now we're going to go and learn that it wasn't only Yoshua who was able to stop the sun. Now it's a little bit strange to say this because we're going to see that doesn't it say in the pasuk this never happened before and never happened after? So we're going to have to explain that pasuk when we get to it. But right now we're going to assume there were other people who managed to do the same thing Yoshua did, or other people that God did it in for them. Tana kashem shamdalo chamal Yoshua kach hamdalo chamal Moshe ulenakdimon ben Gurion. Okay, so who's Nachman ben Gurion? We'll get to in a second, although the Gemara is really not going to tell you. You have to really look in Ta'anit. We learned this story. Yoshua cries. So Yoshua we learn from the Psukim. It's the only place where it says it explicitly. Nachdimon ben Gurion Gemara. Nachdimon ben Gurion, there's a tradition. And this was a story that was told in Masechet Ta'anit about a guy, there was no water, and they had to borrow water from this Gentile. And he made a promise that he would get back to him by a certain day, and the rain still hadn't come, and he wasn't able to return the water. He's going to have to pay this huge amount of money. And he goes to pray to God, and the sun is basically setting, and the guy comes to him up, the sun set, look, you're stuck. He prays to God, God brings the rain. But then the guy says, very nice, you brought the rain, but it's too late, you missed your time. And then God made the day stop, and the sun stopped from setting, and then he was able to prove that the rain came in the right time. Okay, so that's the story where we see the sun stopped for somebody else. Where do we get from Moshe? Atya achel achel. We're going to have what we call Xer Shava. We're going to say the same pasuk appears by Yoshua and by Moshe, and that means that Moshe must have had the same thing happen to him that Yoshua did. Now, the first one is a little bit out there, I would say. It's not so clear why, just because we make the Xer Shava, it has to do with this. But we'll see some other explanations that maybe are a little stronger and maybe can then help us better understand why we're using this pasuk. Adya achel achel. So ktiv hacha by Moshe it says in Sefer Dvarim, Perek. Let's find it for a second. Perek Bet pasuk kafei. Hayom hazeh achel te pachtecha. I'm going to read the whole thing. On this day, I'm going to give the fear, the yiratcha. Okay, pachtecha v'yiratcha. The people will be fearful of you. Al pnei ha'amim, all the other nations. Tacha kol hashamayim asher yishma'un shemacha v'ragzu v'chalu mipanecha. They're going to hear about you, and they're going to be fearful from you. Okay, they're going to be scared of you. You can see, even though they're using the word achel, which is on that day I will start to learn it, but really, and later the Gemara is going to say, it's really from the end of that pasuk, because how is the fear going to be upon people? Well, if people see you stop the sun from setting, they're going to see how powerful you are. Now, ktiv hacha, where does it's used the same language by Yoshua? This is the weakness of this position. Achel te pachtecha. Okay, there also the same words appear. The problem is this is nowhere near the story of the sun stopping in the sky. It's in Yoshua chapter 3. Okay, the sun stops in chapter 10. In Yoshua chapter 3, it says, Hashem says to Yoshua, on this day, achel gadlecha be'enei kol Yisrael sheyid'un kasher yitei Moshe yemach. Also here it says, I'm going to start making you great among the Jewish people, even it's not even among the other nations. And it doesn't really seem to have to do with this topic, but they say, well, what made Yeshua great? One of the things was this thing happening. And therefore, we're going to learn from there to Moshe. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Amal. So second opinion here. The first one was a unnamed opinion. Now we have Rabbi Yochanan. Atya Tate Tate. So by Moshe, it's the same pasuk I will give. Ktiv hacha achel te pachtecha. That was by Moshe. Uktib Yoshua. Now here, this one is a little stronger because it's in the context of the pasuk right before the sun stops. Biyom Tet Hashem et Emori. So there it's talking about giving the Amorites into the hands of the Jews. And by Moshe it says, I will give the fear of the nations upon you. I'll put the fear of the nations upon you. There we have the same word being used. And in Yoshua, this is in the context of this story. So from there they learn to Moshe. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, who's the one who we keep coming back to today. This is the only machloket that doesn't have Rabbi Elazar in it also. Amal, migufe de krashamale. What do you mean? You get it from the content of that pasuk. Forget about the gzera shava. It's the later words in that pasuk, and that's why I read them originally. They're going to hear all about you, and they'll be fearful of you. That's what it says to Moshe. Now, what are they going to see that Moshe did? That's so awesome that they're going to all see. Right? Remember, in a time where you don't have strong communication between places, the one thing everybody will see is the sun stopping. And then people will start asking, what's going on? Eventually they'll get back to them. Might take a while, but eventually they'll understand that this happened because of Moshe, and then they'll be fearful of him. So that's the reference. Okay, so three options to where we get it from. But now we get to the big question that I mentioned before, which is made today. Lo ayake yomahu lefanav acharav. But it says in the pasuk by Yoshua, there was no day like this before or after. So how could you say this happened before in Moshe's time and after in Nakdimon ben Gurion's time? So the answer, Ibait, Ema, two possible answers. Sha'otu delav and afishe kulehai. After we just said how many hours the sun stopped, that didn't happen in the other times, right? The other times it was small, a little bit of time. We don't know how long, but it wasn't. It's 24, 36, 48, or however many hours it stopped, right? 12, 24, 36. But, right, it wasn't that many hours. V'ibait, Ema, some people say, Avnei Barad lo havu. Well, they might have been able to stop the sun, but there wasn't also these stones, these hailstones that came down. Tichtiv, vayibenu sam mipnei bnei Israel, hem b'mora bechorom, ve'Hashem shlich aleim avanim gdolot min hashamayim ad azeka vayamutu. In the end, what was awesome about it wasn't just the sun stopping, but these hailstones that came down and killed the people. That's what was so awesome about it. It was a combination of factors which didn't happen with Moshe nor with Nakdimon ben Gurion. Now we're getting off. That was all our first topic today, which again we got to presumably because this machlok at Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Although we did get into this idea of Sefer Yashar and the forefathers and what made them Yashar and their relations with Gentiles, if we go with the Netziv and his commentary. Now we're going to have another place where this Sefer HaYashar comes up in the Torah. Tiv. It's actually in the Tanakh, in the prophets, okay, which is also where it came up here. In Yoshua, now it's going to be in Sefer Shmuel. Now, when Shaul and Yonatan died, David does a kina. Vayikonen David, he says a kina about them, what do you call it? Like an elegy, I think it's called, right? A song about people who die. Vayomer lelamed b'nei Yehuda keshet. Okay, so he says, we need to teach the Bnei Yehuda how to use arrows, right? That's the response. They were killed in war, and we need to know the Bnei Yehuda need to learn keshet, how to use bow and arrow. Now, Hinei Ketuvah Sefer Yashar, and it's written in the Sefer Yashar that Yehuda is strong in the keshet. My Sefer Yashar. So now we're going to have three opinions. What is the Sefer Yashar, and where does it say about Yehuda in this book that we're going to call Yashar, and why is it called Yashar? So now we're going to have three interpretations. The first one we know already. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, same person who was mentioned earlier. Zeh Sefer Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov shenekru Yesharim dechtivu tamot nafshi mot Yesharim vati achariti kamo. That's Bilam. I want to die like the forefathers. V'hei Chamar. Now where does it say it there? This is in the brachot of Yaakov to Yehuda. Yehuda ata yoducha achecha yadcha ba'oref oivecha. Okay, your brothers will thank you because your hand is in the back of your enemy. Okay, or yadcha. Well, there's a bunch of different interpretations what the yad and the oref is and what we're talking. Oref is the back of the neck. Now, how are we going to get to keshet from here? What's the milchama shetzricha yad keneged oref? Hebeomeo zo kashet. Different interpretations of what this means, yad keneged oref, but if you think about it, we'll go with one. When you do a bow and arrow, your hand is at the same height as your neck. Okay, even though it's talking about the back of your neck, but still, your hand is at the same height level as that. And therefore, that must be keshet. Okay, again, it's all a reference. It's not really clear from there, but it is a reference. Now, the other two opinions, not so surprisingly, are going to be Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, the ones we keep coming back to. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Zeh Sefer Mishneh Torah, it's Sefer Devarim. Why? Amai karu le Sefer Yashar, Dichtiv Asita Yashar Vato B'nei Hashem. That's where Moshe commands the people to do the Yashar Vatov in the eyes of God. Behei Chamramiza, where is there an allusion to Yehuda being those who know Kashet? Well, where's there a reference to Yehuda? In the brachot at the end of the book, just like in Breshit, there were the brachot of Yaakov to the sons. We have at the end Vizot Bracha, the brachot to the sons from the tribes from Moshe. Yadav Ravlo. Okay, his hands will be the ones fighting for him. Now, now most wars need one hand because you use your sword, one hand. But what do you need two hands for, if not a bow and arrow? Zokeshen. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amal. Zeh Sefer Shoftim. Very surprising one to be called Yesharim, and you'll see in a minute why it's so surprising. Amai karu le Sefer Hayashar dichtiv bayamim ahem ein melech b'Yisrael. In the days of the Shoftim, comes up all over the book. There was no king. And ish hayashar be'einav yaseh. Everybody did what was straight in their own eyes. This is exactly the opposite of what you would think yashar is. Yashar is an objective yashar, but in this book, it was subjective. Everybody just did whatever they wanted. Okay, I want to stop for a quick minute, and then we'll get to where there's a reference to Yehuda being with the Keshet here. But if you notice the difference between the three psukim, one is defining the forefathers that are yesharim. The second one is a commandment to be Ashar. And the third is people who really weren't Yesharim, right? They were Yesharim in their own definition of Yashar. So it's almost like a progression, right? First, it's really the ideal. That's what they are. The next that you should be, and the third is you're really not. Okay. Anyway, that's just an interesting comparison. Now we're going to go back and find where's the remes for this. The beginning of Sefer Shoftim talks a little bit, it's kind of similar to Yoshua, where it talks about the stuff they still need to conquer, and then they conquer some stuff. So it says there, in order to know the future generations of Israel, to teach them milchama, to teach them to fight. Okay, we're not up to Yehuda yet. Okay, this is just general. Now we have to see how the lamda milchama is keshet, and then how we know this is referring to Yehuda. So, what do you need to learn, right? To kill someone with a sword is not too much of an art form, but keshet, bow and arrow, you have to be very, right? Try, playing darts and stuff. It's not very simple. Archery, right? Okay, so this is keshet. Now, minalim b'Yehuda aktiv. How do you know that's talking about Yehuda? Dichtiv mi ya'aleh lanu b'tchila ala knani lilachem bo, vayomer Hashem Yehuda ya'aleh. Okay, and this is where it talks about in Sefer Shoftim. Just one second. Right, so it says, right, no, okay. Anyway, that's the first psukim in Sefer Shoftim, is this pasuk, and it says, I told you, the beginning of Sefer Shoftim is all about who's going to conquer, the conquering, whatever conquering wasn't finished in Yoshua yet. It says, who's going to go first? Yehuda. So then when it talks about L'lamdam Milchama, must be talking about Yehuda. So that was our second section of debates. Our first was how many hours the sun stood in the time of Yoshua. From there, we got to this other pasuk where Sefer Hayashar was mentioned, because it was mentioned by the sun stopping in Yoshua, and it's mentioned in this pasuk in the Kina of David. And then here we brought three different interpretations of Sefer Hayashar, and interestingly, again, there's a double connection here. One, Sefer Hayashar to the previous section, and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani appear here in the debate. Now we're going to have one last debate with them, and then we'll move back to our Mishnah. Vayarem hatabach et hashok v'ha'aleha vayasim lifnei Shaul. So this is when Shaul comes to Shmuel, and Shmuel tells him he's going to be king. And there it says the butcher, the person making the meat, picked up the shok, the thigh, and the aleha, and put it before Shaul. What is this aleha? Okay, this has nothing to do with anything really that we're talking about, but they wanted to find what this word is, my aleha. And again, we're going to have three interpretations, and the same three people we just had. Last one was Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Here it's just going to be Rabbi Yochanan, and then Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. That seems to be the connection. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Shok v'Aliyah. It's the thigh and the tail. My v'ha'aleha. Why is it called now? Aleha means and on it. So why is it called an anet? Well, okay, the tail is very close to the thigh. Rabbi Elazar Omer, shok v'chazeh, the thigh and the chest. That's a little different. Now it is still above it, but it's not really the next thing right above it. So my bahalea, demachile l'chazeh ilave deshok kibai anufe umonfele. Well, there's what's called tenufat. When you wave the korban shlamim in front of by the altar, you take the thigh, and then you take the piece of meat that's from the chest, and then you put the chest on top of the thigh, and then it's waved. So now they say, that's what it means, aleh, what goes on top of it when you do the waving. The Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amal shok v'shofi. Okay, the shok and the part right above it, the connector piece. So now you're going to see why. My ba'aleh, what does it mean? And on it, about right on it, because shofi ilave de shokai. It's right above it. That's the piece that connects it to the part of the body right above it, to the torso. So from there you see what aleh is. Okay, not such an interesting debate what this word is, but it happens to be a debate between the three of them. Okay, back to our main topic. The Mishnah then has two other halachot. Okay, lo yitached. If we go back to the Mishnah for a quick minute, we had the first one about ema midim be'ema b'punta ka'ot of kochavim because of chashudim ala riviyah. That was the first topic we covered. Now we're going to cover the next two, which is a woman shouldn't go alone into a room with a man who's an idol worshiper because we're worried they might engage in relations with her. And a man shouldn't go into a room alone with them because we're worried that the idol worshiper might kill the person. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about this. Right now, we're going to start with the yichud of the woman. Now, if you might have been thinking about this, and if not, but the Gemara will tell you, well, b'maya skinan, what are we talking about? One woman with one man? Even with a Jew, that's not permitted. So what do you mean? A woman shouldn't go into a room alone with a Gentile. A woman should go into a room alone with a Jewish man for the same concern. Hatznan. Even two women can't go into a room alone with a man. We're worried that something might transpire there. That's what we call yichud. So turning now to Amabed, Ella Bitzlata, if you say it's three, maybe we're one more, right? Even three women shouldn't be alone with an idol worshiper. But if the assumption is the idol worshippers are prutzim ba'arayot, meaning they engage in all sorts of inappropriate sexual behaviors, well then also Jews who engage, who are prutzim, okay, it's also not permitted because look at this Mishnah. So once you define idol worshippers as prutzim, which again, right, not that all idol worshippers are, but the whole issue here is there's a concern that they might be. You don't know, but maybe they are. So, well, look at this. V'hatznan, aval isha achad, it says in the Mishnah, isha achad mityachedet im shnei anashim. Okay, this is hilcha yichud. So a woman, it's a Masechet Kiddushin. A woman can go alone in a room with two men. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, but Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, lo shanu ela b'ksherim. That's two Jewish men who were known to be pretty straight. Aval b'prutzim afilu asara nami lo. But if it's prutzim, you shouldn't even go alone with 10 Jewish men. So basically, you can't say, oh, it's one more than what's permitted with Jews, because what's permitted with Jews who are prutzim is actually nothing, really. You're not allowed to even a huge group of women. Maasehaya, and in fact, the Mishnah continues. There was maybe it's the Gemara they're continuing. Maasehaya v'otziu asara b'mita. There was a case where there were 10 men who took out this one woman in a bed, meaning they made it look like she was dead, and they were taking her out to be buried. And they went out because the burial sites were outside the city, the graves, and they took her out so that they could rape her outside, but there was nobody there. Okay, we're going to talk about this later. On the roads and outside the city, that's where there's the most danger. There's no one there, nobody will know what they're doing. And here you see that even with Jews, this is forbidden. So we're trying to figure out where's the difference between the idol worshippers and the Jews. Well, lotzricha bi'ishto imo. The chidush here is if the Gentile is with his wife, okay, the idol worshiper is with his wife, then you can't be alone with the idol worshiper and his wife. Whereas you can be with a Jew. Why is that? His wife lets him do what he wants, basically, and doesn't stop him. And therefore, there's a concern if you're alone with the wife and the Gentile, this idol worshiper, then something might happen. Aval Yisrael, but with Jews, their wives watch them and make sure nothing happens. They'll stop them. And therefore, that's the difference. Okay, that's what they come up with what the possible difference is. Again, whenever you have contradictory Mishnayot, it's tough to really know if that's the answer that the Gemara gives is the only answer. Perhaps there's other answers, but this is the answer the Gemara comes up with, that this is the distinction. Now we're going to get to another thing, which is now wait, if the next part of the Mishnah is saying a man shouldn't go alone with an idol worshiper because the idol worshiper might kill the man, which we'll get to soon, but why aren't we worried about that with the woman? Why are we only worried about araya? Why are we not worried about murder? Basically, Rabbi Yirmiyah says we are worried, but in unique cases where the woman is an important, prominent woman, and then they'd be in big trouble if they killed her, right? They want to stay far away from killing a prominent woman. Okay, maybe he was even, her husband's friendly with the Roman authorities or something, and they'll get in big trouble if they kill her. So in that case, now this is interesting, they're not worried about engaging in relations with her, and it seems to be maybe raping her would be a problem, although as we know, many people don't voluntarily tell people they were raped, and maybe she won't want to come forward with it. Or it could be also they think maybe they'll seduce her and they'll succeed in having her do it willingly, and she'll just be quiet about the whole thing. So that Isha Chashuva is irrelevant to, but killing her would be much more relevant. Reb Idi Amar, he gives a different answer. Isha Klei Zayana Aleha. Okay, she has her weapons on her. What does this mean exactly? Rashi and Tosafot have a big machloket about this. Rashi says that a woman protects herself, by nature she's protected. Why is that? Because the idol worshiper would rather have her alive so we can engage in relations with her than kill her. Okay, that it's built in that they always prefer to have her alive so they can engage in relations with her. Like she's better than a dead person. Tosfot thinks that it's talking about that people don't kill women, okay? Like it's a cultural thing, right? They'll kill men. They see men as a threat. They don't necessarily kill women either because they don't see them as threats, or the way people perceive women in society, they're not going to kill them, okay? This is, something, maybe we see, maybe we don't see. Anyway, it's an interesting debate they have between them. Now they're going to ask my Benai. So we had two possible explanations as to why they're not worried they're going to kill the women, either because she's Isha Chashuva, and then, by the way, a regular woman we would be worried about, right? Who's not Chashuva. We worried they would kill her. But the second opinion is all women we're not really worried about. So my Benayu, what's the difference between them? Ika Benayu, Isha Chashuva bein anashim, v'she'ena Chashuva bein anashim. Okay, according to Rashi, what does it mean she's not Chashuva bein anashim? And this is all one. According to Tosafot, these are actually, I'm not going to get into it, but these are two separate nafkaminas. According to Rashi, it's all one. It's a woman who's known, like, prominent among men, meaning the men view her as a prominent woman in society, but she's ugly. Okay? This is the whole question, right? Are we not, there's this assumption that the Gentiles won't engage in relations, these idol worshippers who are not interested in women that are ugly. So if she's chashuva ben anashim, but if she's prominent, but not really appealing to them to have relations with her, which again is also a question, okay? And especially if we're dealing with rape, right? Not so clear that people distinguish here between, not that I know the head of rapists, but it's a whole interesting question here. And I see you're asking, is it rape? Is it consensual? I think it seems to be a combination of factors. Like it could be both that they're worried about, or either or. But now they're going to say that if she's, so again, this is Rashi, if she's prominent, but she's not attractive, then she doesn't have klei zayina aleha, but she is an isha chashuva. So according to option one, you wouldn't be worried they're going to kill her. She could do it. According to option two, well, she doesn't have that protection, so she can't go alone with them, okay, because they might kill her. So there would be a concern that they would murder her, and not the other concern. Okay. Tanya Kavatedra of Idi Bar Avin. We're now going to bring a sprite to support the second opinion that it's Isha Klei Zayina Aleha. Okay, even if they're in peace with her, then she shouldn't be alone with them because they're chashudim ala rayot. Okay, and this, right? One second. This supports Rav Ada. 1 second. Right. Vadai lo yargua. Right. Right. What does it mean? Shashalom ima, that they definitely won't kill her because she's klei zayana aleha, however you define that, right? If we go with Rashi, because she's a woman, so even though Shalom Ima, how would you know that? Well, you know that because she's a woman and they don't kill women, then she still can't because of the Arayot, and that sounds like Rav Edi's opinion. Lo yitacheda damime. Now we get to the one about a man not going alone with an idol worshiper because there's fear of killing. So now we're going to bring a braita that is going to give all sorts of tips if you're alone with a Gentile on a road, okay, or an idol worshiper that you're worried they might kill you. What should you do to protect yourself? Okay, these are just tips. This reminds me when I went to Barnard and I moved to New York City, and I remember when in the orientation they start giving us all these tips how to walk on the street, and how to protect yourself, put your key between your fingers, like all these tips about how. Now, was every person on the street a murderer, a mugger? No, most people were not. And I think if you think about it in that sense, this was just a way to say, if you want to protect yourself, this is the best way to protect yourself. Not that every idol worshiper on the street or every non-Jewish person is out to kill you. No. But does that mean that we shouldn't take any precautions? We should take precautions because there are people among them that might. And therefore, this is what you should do when you're walking on a road and there's nobody else around and you're worried that something might happen, right? If you happen to find yourself in that situation, right? And the Mishnah is telling you, don't get yourself into that situation because you never know what could happen. But again, this doesn't mean every person out there is going to kill us. Okay. So I think that's, when I thought of that example of when I went to university, it was like exactly that, right? For sure. I never met anyone who was actually trying to do anything to harm me. But still, they said, take precautions, you never know. So Tanu Rabbanan, here's a bright that's going to list a whole bunch of things. Yisrael sheniz damelo goy baderech. If you happen to be alone with an idol worshiper on a path, to flow the yamino, have him on your right side so that your right hand is ready. Assuming most people are righties, I happen to be lefty, but most people are righties, right? Use your right hand to protect yourself. Rabbi Shmuel, Benosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokomer, he says, it really depends what kind of weapon they have. B'sayif, if they have a sword, now the sword they would hold on their left. It would be, like in those movies you see, like the sword and the sword holder. So the sword is on the left. So when they go to take it out, you have your right hand right there. You can stop it. But so b'sayif to flow the yamino. But b'makel, if he's holding a stick in his hand, then to flow smolo. Now, where is he holding it? In his right hand. Now, if you're on the right, if he's to your right, then it's far for you to get across his body to block the stick. So if he's on your left, then the stick is right next to you, even though it's your left hand, but at least it's closer to you that you're able to turn around at least and use your right hand to grab the stick. But it's going to be very hard to cross over his path and get to the stick. If you're going up a hill or down a hill, lo Yisrael lamata, you shouldn't be down at the bottom, v'goy lamala, and the goy should be above you. El Yisrael lamala v'goy lamata. You should be up above. That gives you perspective, right? And you can see what they're doing at all times. V'al yashuach lepanav, and don't bend down in front of him. Shema yarotze golgolto. You might smash your skull. Shalu lehechan holech. If he asks where you're going, yarchiv lo et haderech. Say you're going farther. Because what will happen? Well, he'll wait till later on in the trip. And by that point, it'll be too late because you'll already turn into the city. And once you go into the city, then you're already protected. So say you're going farther. Who did this? Yaakov. What did he say to Esav? He says, until I come to you in Seir. But he didn't really go to Seir. He went to Sukkot. So he told him he was going farther, but then left earlier. And we'll finish with a maaseh. Maaseh b'talmidei Rabbi Akiva shayu olchim l'chziv. Pagshu b'hem listim, amru lahem la'ana atem olchim. So the students of Rabbi Akiva were walking. They happen upon a bandit. The bandit says, "Where are you going?" Amru lahem la'ako. They were really going to Ksiv, but they said Ksiv, which is Achsiv, but they said Ako. Kevan shigiu l'chziv pirshu. When they got to Ksiv, they went off to the side. They go into the city. Now the bandit went after them. Now he wasn't going to do anything because now they were in the city. Amru lahem talmidei miyatem. He said, "Who are you the students of? You're obviously very smart that you knew to do this to protect yourself from me." Amru lahem talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Amru lahem ashrei Rabbi Akiva v'talmidav shelo paga behen adam ramei olam. These listim said, "Wow, Rabbi Akiva, his students are always protected because look, they're very smart and they know how to protect themselves." So this is why I said it's all precautionary, right? Which, as you see, is happening. By the way, they assume these are the schema who are Jews, not just, okay, there's another proof. It's not just the idol worshippers. Well, there were also Jews that were out to kill people. But as a rule, they were more concerned with the idol worshippers than the Jews, but it doesn't mean there aren't Jews like that. And like we saw the stories of Dama Benatina, we're going to come back to with other stories, doesn't mean all idol worshippers are bad. It's just precautionary. So let's review our daf. We started with the sun stopping for how many hours? Two different versions. Was the numbers they were talking about the whole day, or was it the extra hours where the sun stopped? Three different opinions. How much? 24, 36, 48. Then we had the Sefer HaYashar reference, which came up also in another pasuk. Three opinions about what Sefer HaYashar is, although we didn't mention that with the Yoshua story, but we did mention it with the others. By the way, also Moshe and Nachdim ben Gurion managed to stop the sun. We saw how we figured that out from Moshe, and then we got to one last machloket about the Shok v'Ha'aleha, three opinions about what that means. Last machloket between Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani and Rabbi Elazar and somebody else. And then we went back to Lo Tikached, Ima, what are we talking about? Isn't it the same as with a Jew? Figured out what the difference is when the wife is around. And then we had this machloket about why we're not concerned with that they're going to murder her. Two different opinions about that and what the case where they would differ. And we finished with this yichud. Man is worried about possibly the idol worshiper if you're worried about murdering. So we brought a bride that basically said, how do you protect yourself when you're alone on the road with someone you don't know and you have no idea what they might or might not do to you? Here are some precautionary things you can do to protect yourself. And with that, we finished for today. Everyone a Shavua Tov, a good fast for those fasting, and Shnishma B'Silvat Tovot.